Have you ever stopped to think about what a mother is capable of sacrificing for her children? What dreams she puts aside? What personal needs she ignores? How many times she chooses her children's well-being above her own? To understand why Sonya Curry's reaction touched the hearts of millions of people, we need to go back to the 1990s, when she was just a young mother from Charlotte, making choices that would shape her family's destiny forever. Charlotte, North Carolina. Winter of 1995. Sonya Curry was sitting at the kitchen table of her modest apartment, surrounded by piles of bills and a calculator that seemed to mock every number she tried to balance. At 29 years old, she already carried the weight of responsibilities that would make many people crumble. But there was something in her eyes that revealed an unshakable determination. Del Curry was once again traveling with the Charlotte Hornets, leaving Sonya alone to care for Steph, then 7 years old, and Seth, 5 years old. The routine had become familiar. Wake up at 5:30, prepare breakfast for the boys, take them to school, work as an administrative assistant at an elementary school, pick up the children, help with homework, simple dinner, and finally, when they slept, sit at that table to try to work miracles with the family budget. Great mothers make impossible choices seem natural, and Sonya was about to make a series of choices that would define not only her life, but her children's future. That specific night, she was holding a $350 bill from the basketball camp that Steph desperately wanted to attend. It was money they didn't have. Del earned well in the NBA, but the constant team changes, unstable contracts, and the cost of maintaining 2 residences, one for the family, another for him during the season, consumed almost everything. It was possible to perceive that Sonya was calculating not just numbers, but dreams. Every cent represented an opportunity for Steph, a chance to develop the talent she saw shining in that skinny boy who lived with a basketball in his hands. Steph appeared in the kitchen, still in pajamas, rubbing his sleepy eyes. "Mom, are you okay?" Sonya quickly put away the bills and smiled at her son. "Of course, baby. Just organizing some things. You should be sleeping." "I heard you sighing," said Steph, with that sharp perception that children have about their parents' emotional state. "Is it because of the camp?" What's most impressive is how children can capture emotional subtleties that adults try to hide, forcing us to be honest even when we'd prefer to protect them from reality. Sonya pulled Steph onto her lap, feeling the familiar warmth of her oldest son. "Steph, Mommy will find a way. I always do, don't I?" "Mom," said Steph, looking directly into her eyes, "if we can't afford it, it's okay. I can train at the park." In that moment, Sonya felt something break and rebuild inside her chest simultaneously. That 7-year-old boy was willing to give up his dreams so as not to cause worry for her. It was a premature maturity that, at the same time, made her proud and broke her heart. "Steph Curry," she said, using his full name as she did when she wanted him to pay complete attention. "You're going to that camp. Mommy promises." How many times in life does a promise made in the kitchen at midnight have the power to change an entire family's destiny? The next morning, Sonya made the first of many choices that would define the next years of her life. She took the pearl necklace that Del had given her at their wedding, her most precious possession, and took it to a pawn shop in downtown Charlotte. "How much do you pay for this?" she asked the attendant, Robert Kim, a middle-aged Korean man who had seen hundreds of people in similar situations. Robert examined the necklace and offered $400. Sonya swallowed hard. It was exactly what she needed for the camp plus a few extra dollars. "Ma'am," said Robert, noticing the reluctance in her eyes, "this necklace means something special to you, doesn't it?" "Yes," replied Sonya, "but my son means more." Something that touches deeply is witnessing the moment when a mother transforms material love into opportunity for her children, knowing she'll never recover what she's losing. Sonya sold the necklace and used the money to enroll Steph in the camp. When Dell asked about the necklace, weeks later, she only said it was stored in a safe place. It wasn't a lie. It was stored in Steph's future. That was just the first of countless sacrifices. During the following years, Sonya developed a subtle art of denying herself things so that the children could have opportunities. She drove a 1989 Honda Civic with broken air conditioning because she preferred to use the repair money for basketball equipment. She wore the same 3 blouses in rotation because she invested in quality sneakers for Steph. She ate homemade sandwiches while ensuring the boys had varied lunches at school. Great mothers make impossible choices seem natural. And Sonya had elevated this art to a level that her own children would only understand years later. In 1998, when Steph was 10 years old, the family's financial situation improved slightly, with a more stable contract from Dell. But Sonya had already developed the habit of putting her children's needs above her own. When Steph showed interest in attending an elite camp in Los Angeles, she worked overtime as a tutor to pay for the trip. During a kitchen conversation that summer, Steph made an observation that would be engraved in Sonya's memory forever. "Mom," he said, now 10 years old and more observant than ever, "why don't you ever buy nice things for yourself? Dad buys them, but you never use them." Sonya stopped washing dishes and looked at her son. It was an innocent question, but one that touched the core of choices she had naturalized. "Steph, do you know what makes me happiest in the world?" she asked, drying her hands and kneeling to his level. "What?" "Seeing you and Seth pursuing your dreams. That's worth more than anything I could buy for myself." Steph hugged her, but there was an intensity in the hug that revealed understanding beyond his years. "Mom, one day, when I'm big, I'm going to give you the life you deserve. I'm going to buy everything you always wanted, but never bought." Naturally, this leads us to question, how many promises from 10-year-old children actually come true? And how many mothers take these promises seriously? Sonya smiled and kissed her son's forehead. "Baby, your happiness is already everything I need." But Steph had planted a seed in that kitchen, a promise he would carry with him for the next 26 years. The following years followed the same pattern. Sonya worked tirelessly, not only at her formal job, but also giving private lessons on weekends to pay for basketball clinics, specialized equipment, and trips to tournaments. She became an expert at finding deals, haggling prices, and working miracles with tight budgets. It was impossible not to notice how she had developed genuine satisfaction in seeing her children prosper. Every basket Steph scored, every game Seth won, every coach who praised her boys. All of this fed a happiness that compensated for any personal sacrifice. In 2001, when Steph was 13 years old, Sonya finally bought something for herself, a new dress for his middle school graduation. It cost $45 at a department store, and she treated it as if it were haute couture. "Mom, you look beautiful," said Steph when he saw her dressed up for the ceremony. "Thank you, son," she replied, adjusting his tie. "But today, the handsome one is you." After graduation, during the celebration dinner at Applebee's, the fanciest restaurant they could afford at the time, Steph repeated the promise he had made years before. "Mom, I swear that one day I'm going to give you everything you deserve. A beautiful house, nice cars, expensive clothes, everything." Sonya held her son's hand across the table. "Steph, you don't owe me anything. Being your mother is the greatest gift I've ever received. Great mothers make impossible choices seem natural. But sometimes these choices create children who grow up determined to repay every sacrifice with compound interest of gratitude." What Sonya didn't know was that Steph wasn't just making empty adolescent promises. He was observing, cataloging, and recording in his memory every time she denied herself something to give opportunities to him and Seth. Every old car she drove, every piece of clothing she wore until it wore out, every personal dream she postponed. All of this was being registered in the mind of a boy who would grow up to become one of the most successful athletes in history. And one day, Steph Curry would remember every sacrifice, every impossible choice his mother had naturalized, and decide it was time to transform kitchen promises into tangible reality. The 10-year-old boy who had promised to give his mother the life she deserved was growing up, and he took that promise more seriously than Sonya could ever have imagined. But what happened next would change everything forever. There is a cruel irony when a son's success exposes the persistent humility of a mother who never learned to put herself first. How is it possible that a woman who raised a millionaire continues living as if she still needed to count every penny? Between 2015 and 2023, Steph Curry built an empire that few athletes in history managed to equal. Contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars, millionaire endorsements, lucrative investments, his wealth grew exponentially each year. But on the other side of the country, in Charlotte, Sonya Curry continued driving the same 2010 Honda Civic and systematically refusing every attempt by her son to improve her quality of life. Great hearts remain small even when the world around them becomes immense. And Sonya was about to prove that some people are genetically incapable of prioritizing themselves. Atherton, California, December 2018. Steph was in his $31 million mansion, a property that occupied almost 3 acres and included a professional basketball court, infinity pool, climate-controlled wine cellar, and panoramic view of San Francisco Bay. Each room was larger than the entire apartment where he had grown up in Charlotte. That morning, he was on the phone with Sonya, as he did religiously every Tuesday and Friday for years. "Mom, how's the car?" asked Steph, knowing that her Honda had more than 200,000 miles and was making worrying noises. "Oh, son, it's working perfectly," replied Sonya, as she always minimized any problem. "You know, I take good care of my things." Steph knew that take good care meant she took the car to cheap repair shops, postponed non-essential repairs, and drove with open windows because the air conditioning had broken 2 years ago. It was possible to perceive that Sonya had developed a coded language to never admit she needed help, even when talking to a son who earned more in one game than she spent in an entire year. "Mom, I want to buy you a new car," said Steph, for the 15th time that year. "Something comfortable, safe, with warranty." "Steph, my love, I don't need a new car," interrupted Sonya, with the infinite patience of someone who had repeated this conversation hundreds of times. "My Honda is great. Besides, you already do so much for me." What's most impressive is how Sonya had created a psychological barrier that prevented her from accepting help, even from a son desperately anxious to repay decades of sacrifices. Steph hung up the phone, and sat in his gourmet kitchen, surrounded by luxuries that his mother had made possible, feeling a frustration that grew with each similar conversation. Isha found him like this, staring into space with that expression she recognized immediately. "She refused again?" asked Isha, sitting next to her husband. "She always refuses," said Steph. "It's like she's afraid to accept anything good for herself." Isha knew that dynamic well. In 10 years of marriage, she had witnessed dozens of Steph's failed attempts to improve Sonya's life. Cars refused, offers to move to a better house denied, expensive gifts returned or donated to charity. Steph, she spent 30 years training herself to deny herself things, said Isha, with the wisdom of someone who had observed that dance for years. It's not something she'll change overnight. Naturally, this leads us to question, how do we undo patterns of self-denial that have become so ingrained that the person can no longer imagine themselves deserving of good things? March 2020. The pandemic had paused the NBA season, giving Steph more time to reflect on things that normally stayed buried under the rush of games and travel. During a family video call, he noticed that Sonya was in a kitchen that looked exactly like the one from 2005. "Mom, are you still in the same house?" asked Steph, although he knew the answer. "Of course, son. Why would I move? This house has everything I need." Steph looked around his own kitchen, with Italian marble countertops and appliances that cost more than many people's annual salary. "Mom, don't you want a bigger house? With more space? Maybe a nice porch where you can read?" "Steph," said Sonya, with that patient tone she used when she thought he was being irrational. "I have a porch, and I don't need a bigger house. It's just me here." Something that touches deeply is realizing that some people become so accustomed to modesty that they genuinely cannot imagine themselves deserving of luxury, even when they have children capable of providing anything. After the video call, Steph did something he had never done before. He hired Jennifer Walsh, a private investigator, to do a discreet report on how Sonya really lived. The report arrived 2 weeks later and touched Steph's heart in a way he didn't expect. Jennifer had documented Sonya's routine with detailed precision. She drove a well-maintained 2015 Honda Civic, but one that already needed maintenance she postponed to save money. She shopped at the same supermarket for 15 years, always comparing prices and using coupons, preferring brands on sale. She lived in a comfortable 3-bedroom house valued at $320,000, modest compared to Steph's properties worth more than $50 million. She wore good quality clothes, but preserved for several years, many bought on clearance or with discounts. She monthly donated 40% of the money Steph sent to local charities, saving the rest for emergencies. She volunteered 15 hours per week at an elementary school, helping children with learning difficulties. Great hearts remain small even when the world around them becomes immense. And the report was mathematical proof that Sonya had remained essentially unchanged by her son's meteoric success. The part that most devastated Steph was discovering that Sonya kept a folder with all the newspaper articles about his career. But when Jennifer asked if she was proud of her son's success, Sonya replied, "Of course I am, but I hope he doesn't forget to be a good person." Even with a son who was a global icon, Sonya's concern was still about character, not achievements. Steph called Sonya that night with a different strategy. "Mom, can I ask you something honest?" he said. "Of course, son." "Why do you donate most of the money I send?" There was a pause long enough for Steph to realize he had touched a sensitive point. "Steph," said Sonya finally, You work very hard for your money. I don't want you to think your mother is taking advantage of that." It was impossible not to feel the depth of that response. Sonya had spent her entire life sacrificing herself for her children, and now that they had prospered, she still felt unworthy of receiving back. "Mom," said Steph, his voice choked with emotion. "You know that everything I have, everything I've achieved, only exists because you gave up everything for me and Seth, right?" "Son, I didn't give up anything. I chose to give everything I could to you. It was the easiest choice of my life." Great hearts remain small even when the world around them becomes immense. And Steph was beginning to understand that his mother's humility wasn't lack of self-esteem. It was pure love in its most refined form. During 2021 and 2022, Steph tried different approaches. He offered to pay for a dream trip. She said she preferred to stay home. He suggested hiring a housekeeper. She replied that cleaning house was therapeutic. He proposed a kitchen renovation. She insisted it was perfectly functional. Each refusal was polite, loving, but firm. Sonya had become a fortress of personal restraint. The last straw came during a visit in December 2022. Steph arrived in Charlotte to spend Christmas and found his mother wearing a coat he remembered from when he was 16 years old. "Mom, this coat is at least 15 years old," he said. "And it's still perfectly good," replied Sonya. "I don't need a new coat." That night, Steph lay awake in the guest room bed, which also hadn't changed in 15 years, and made a decision that would change everything. He had spent years trying to convince Sonya to accept gifts. He had consistently failed because he was asking permission from a woman who had programmed herself to never put herself first. It was time to stop asking and simply do. "Mom," he said at breakfast the next morning, "do you remember that house in the Rosewood neighborhood that we always passed when I was little? The one you said was the most beautiful house in Charlotte?" "The white mansion with the rose garden?" asked Sonya, smiling with the memory. "Of course I remember. You always asked me to drive slowly in front of it. Why did you like that house so much?" Sonya stopped stirring the eggs and got that distant expression that emerges when we relive precious memories. "It was a house that breathed happiness," she said. "I always imagined what it would be like to wake up every morning in a house like that. But," she laughed, "they were just daydreams of a young mother with two mischievous boys. How many times in life are our most impossible daydreams exactly what we need to pursue, to honor those we love?" Steph smiled and kissed his mother's forehead. "They were beautiful dreams, Mom." What Sonya didn't know was that Steph had just found exactly what he was looking for. Not just a house, but the house. The house that carried 25 years of unconfessed dreams from a woman who had spent her entire life dreaming small so her children could dream big. Great hearts remain small even when the world around them becomes immense. But sometimes, children grow up determined to make their mothers' hearts expand, to embrace all the happiness they deserve. Steph Curry had found his mission for 2024, to give his mother not just a pipe-ivy house, but the dream she had silently kept for decades. No one could imagine that that moment would be the turning point. There is a difference between giving a gift and realizing a dream. Gifts are things we buy. Dreams are pieces of soul that we transform into reality. Steph Curry was about to discover that transforming his mother's silent dream into reality would require not just money, but a military operation of love and discretion. January 2024. Steph was back in Teawood, California, but his mind remained fixed on the conversation about the house in the Rosewood neighborhood. For decades, he had passed in front of that property without really seeing it. But now every detail his mother had mentioned gained monumental importance. That afternoon, he did something he hadn't done in years. He drove through Charlotte's streets via Google Street View, looking for the house that had inhabited Sonya's dreams for more than 2 decades. Great plans are born when love meets determination. And Steph was about to orchestrate the most complex and emotionally charged plan of his life. When he finally found the property on Google Maps, Steph stopped breathing for a moment. The Rosewood estate was even more impressive than his childhood memories suggested. A colonial-style mansion with 6,500 square feet, meticulously maintained gardens, a circular fountain at the entrance, and yes, that rose garden that had given the property its name. But what really moved him was being able to imagine his mother in those gardens, finally in a house that breathed happiness as she had described. Steph picked up the phone and called Marcus Williams, his most trusted personal assistant. "Marcus, I need you to do a very discreet research for me," said Steph. "There's a property in Charlotte that I want to know if it's for sale, but this has to be absolutely confidential." "Sure, Steph. What's the address?" Steph provided the details and asked Marcus to find out everything: price, property history, current condition, and if the owners would be willing to sell. It was possible to perceive that Steph was entering a planning phase that went far beyond a real estate purchase. It was a love mission that needed to be executed with military perfection. 3 days later, Marcus called back with information that seemed to come directly from a Hollywood script. "Steph, you won't believe this," said Marcus, obvious excitement in his voice. "The Rosewood estate has been officially on the market for just 2 weeks. The owners, Robert Kim and Sarah Mitchell, are an elderly couple moving to a retirement community in Florida. What's most impressive is how the universe sometimes aligns circumstances in a way that seems almost impossible to be coincidence." "What's the price?" asked Steph. $4.8 million, replied Marcus. "But Steph, there's something even more interesting. I talked discreetly with the broker, and he mentioned that the couple is more interested in selling to someone who will love the house as they loved it than necessarily the highest bidder." Steph smiled. It was perfect. Not only was the house available, but the sellers had exactly the mentality that would make the transaction more meaningful. "Marcus, I want you to arrange a visit for me, but it needs to be ultra-secret. I can't risk this leaking to the media, or, worse, reaching my mother's ears." Naturally, this leads us to question: how do you plan a surprise when you're one of the most recognizable people on the planet? The visit was scheduled for a Monday morning, when Steph was officially training at private facilities. Marcus arranged for Steph to arrive in a van with tinted windows, accompanied only by Tyler Brooks, his financial advisor, and Amanda Foster, an interior decorator who had worked on several Curry family properties. When Steph stepped on the property for the first time as an adult, he felt an emotion he didn't expect. It was like visiting a dream he didn't know he shared with his mother. Robert Kim, 68 years old, and Sarah Mitchell, 65, received the group on the main porch. They had been informed about the potential buyer's identity, but Marcus had emphasized the importance of discretion. "Mr. Curry," said Robert, "it's an honor to have you here. This house has been our home for 32 years. We raised 3 children here, and every corner has a special story. Something that touches deeply is realizing that some houses are not just properties, but repositories of family love that transcend generations." Steph spent the next 2 hours exploring every room, every garden, every detail of the property. But he wasn't just seeing the house as it was. He was imagining how it would be when transformed into his mother's dream home. The main kitchen was spacious and bright, but Steph was already visualizing Amanda redesigning it with appliances that would make Sonya's life easier. The modest office overlooking the garden would be perfect for the library she always wanted but never allowed herself to have. The main closet was larger than Sonya's current bedroom. Great plans are born when love meets determination. And with each room visited, Steph's plan became more elaborate and emotionally charged. During the visit to the rose garden, Sarah shared a story that sealed the transaction's fate. "You know, Mr. Curry," said Sarah, gently touching a red rose, "over the years, several people would pass by here slowly, admiring the garden. There was a lady who used to bring 2 small boys to see the roses. She always said to them, 'One day, when you grow up, maybe you'll live in a house like this.'" Steph felt a chill run down his spine. It was impossible not to feel that Sarah was describing exactly Sonya and her children 2 decades ago. "This lady, do you remember what she looked like?" asked Steph, trying to keep his voice casual. "An African-American woman. Very elegant, always impeccably dressed despite simple clothes. And the boys. One of them lived with a basketball in his hands," said Sarah, smiling with the memory. In that moment, Steph understood that he wasn't just buying a house. He was completing a circle that had begun 25 years before, when a young mother took her children to admire a life that seemed unattainable. "Mr. Kim, Mrs. Mitchell," said Steph, "I want to buy this house, not just for market value, but for what it represents. I'm buying for my mother, and she's exactly the lady you remember seeing here with 2 boys." Robert and Sarah looked at each other with an expression that mixed surprise and deep emotion. "You're one of the boys who used to come here?" asked Sarah, tears forming in her eyes. "Yes," replied Steph, "and now I want to give this house to the woman who always dreamed of living here." The transaction was closed that same week for $5.2 million. Steph had offered above the asking price because, as he explained to Tyler, some things are priceless. But buying the house was just the first step of the plan. Steph wanted every detail to be perfect when he handed the keys to Sonya. Amanda Foster received the most detailed briefing of her career. Transform the Rosewood estate into the dream home of a woman who had spent 30 years dreaming small. "Amanda," said Steph during a planning meeting, "I want you to imagine a mother who never bought anything luxurious for herself, who always chose function over form, practicality over beauty. Now imagine what the perfect house would be for her if she could have anything." Amanda took notes furiously, while Steph described Sonya's tastes. Soft colors, lots of space for books, a kitchen where she could cook for large groups, gardens where she could read outdoors, an organized closet where every piece had its place. "Steph, what's the budget for the renovation?" asked Amanda. "There is no budget," replied Steph, without hesitation. "I want it to be perfect. Absolutely perfect." During the 6 weeks that followed, the Rosewood estate was transformed into an operation involving 30 professionals working in coordinated shifts. Amanda supervised every detail, from furniture selection to choosing plants for the garden. The library was designed with floor-to-ceiling shelves and a reading chair positioned to capture the perfect afternoon light. The kitchen received state-of-the-art appliances, but maintained the warm feeling of a family home. The main closet was organized with a system that would make Sonya's life easier, but without seeming excessively luxurious. Great plans are born when love meets determination. And Steph was discovering that creating the perfect house for his mother was simultaneously the most expensive and most gratifying project of his life. The final touch came when Steph decided to create a special garden in the backyard, an area dedicated exclusively to roses, with a bench, where Sonya could sit and appreciate the flowers that had symbolized her dreams for so many years. In April 2024, the house was ready. Amanda did the final tour with Steph, and both knew they had created something special. "Steph," said Amanda, as they walked through the rose garden at sunset, "in 20 years of career, I've never worked on a project with so much love involved. This house isn't just beautiful. It has soul." Steph looked around the property that represented decades of his mother's dreams, finally realized. It was impossible not to feel that he was about to give Sonya much more than a house. He was about to validate 30 years of sacrifices and prove that all the postponed dreams had been worth it. Now only one thing remained: finding the perfect moment for the surprise that would change Sonya's life forever. Mother's Day was less than 3 weeks away. It was the perfect timing for the most important gift of Steph Curry's life. And it was then that the truth finally came to light. Some moments are so pure, so full of true love, that they manage to touch the hearts of millions of strangers simultaneously. How is it possible that an intimate reaction between mother and son becomes a universal symbol of gratitude, sacrifice, and unconditional love? May 15th, 2024, Mother's Day. Steph Curry woke up that morning knowing he was about to live one of the most important days of his life. Not because of some decisive game or professional achievement, but because the moment had finally come to fulfill a promise made by a 10-year-old boy in a Charlotte kitchen. The plan was simple on the surface, but loaded with emotion in every detail. Steph had told Sonya he wanted to spend Mother's Day with her in Charlotte, and that he had something special planned. She had insisted that his presence was already gift enough, as she always did. Great moments are born when years of love crystallize into a single action. And Steph was about to discover that 30 years of accumulated gratitude can manifest in ways that transform not only the people involved, but everyone who witnesses the moment. Steph arrived at Sonya's house at 10 o'clock in the morning, discreetly accompanied by Jason Martinez, his personal videographer, who had received instructions to capture everything with the discretion of a wildlife photographer. Sonya opened the door wearing a simple floral dress that Steph recognized as being from her wardrobe for at least 5 years. Her smile upon seeing him was radiant, as if her son's mere presence was the best gift she could receive. "Happy Mother's Day, Mom," said Steph, hugging her with that intensity he reserved for special moments. "Thank you, my love," replied Sonya. "You being here already makes this day perfect." It was possible to perceive that Sonya genuinely believed that hug was the peak of her celebration. She had programmed herself to extract maximum happiness from the simplest gestures. "Mom, do you remember I said I had something special planned?" asked Steph, barely able to contain his anxiety. "Steph, you didn't need to plan anything. Your presence is already the best gift." "Well, actually, I want to show you something. There's a house I'm thinking of buying here in Charlotte, and I wanted your opinion before making the decision." Sonya seemed genuinely interested. Over the years, Steph occasionally asked for advice about real estate, investments, and she always felt useful being able to contribute with her perspective. "Of course, son. Where is it?" "In the Rosewood neighborhood. Shall we take a look?" What's most impressive is how Steph managed to keep his voice casual while mentioning the neighborhood that housed his mother's childhood dreams. They drove in comfortable silence through Charlotte's familiar streets. Sonya occasionally commented about changes in the neighborhood, stores that had closed, families that had moved. It was the kind of quiet conversation that Steph had learned to value after years traveling the world. When they turned onto the Rosewood Estates street, Sonya became quiet. Steph could feel the change in her energy, as if she was recognizing something familiar but couldn't fully process it. "Steph," she said when the mansion came into view, "this is the house you always admired when we were little," completed Steph, stopping the car at the circular entrance. Sonya looked at the property with an expression that mixed nostalgia and confusion. "Son, this house is too beautiful for you, and it must cost a fortune." Naturally, this leads us to question: how can a mother still be worried about her son's expenses when he earns hundreds of millions of dollars? Steph turned off the engine and turned to face Sonya. "Mom, you're right. This house is too expensive for me." Sonya seemed relieved. "I knew that." "But," interrupted Steph, taking an envelope from his pocket, "it's not too expensive for you." He handed the envelope to Sonya with hands that trembled slightly. "Happy Mother's Day, Mom. This is your house." Time stopped. Sonya opened the envelope with trembling fingers and found the property deeds in her name, along with a handwritten card. "To the woman who transformed a simple house into a home full of love. To the mother who taught me that dreaming costs nothing, but making dreams come true is worth everything. This house was always yours in your dreams. Now it's really yours, with all my love and eternal gratitude. Steph." The reaction that followed was not only seen by Steph and Jason, who was filming discreetly from the back seat. It was a reaction that, in the next 48 hours, would be seen by more than 50 million people around the world. Sonya read the card once, then again, then looked at the deeds, then at Steph, then back at the house. Her face went through a sequence of expressions that revealed the real-time processing of a reality her mind was struggling to accept. "Steph," she whispered, "you can't. I can't. This is too much." And then the tears came. Something that touches deeply is witnessing the moment when 30 years of self-denial meet 30 years of gratitude, creating an emotional collision that has no words to be adequately described. Sonya cried like Steph had never seen. They weren't tears of sadness, but of complete emotional release. Decades of denying herself beautiful things, of dreaming small, of considering herself unworthy of luxury. All of this being washed away by tears that validated every sacrifice she had made. "Mom," said Steph, also crying now, "you deserve this and so much more. You gave your entire life so I could have the conditions to do this." "Steph, I don't deserve a house like this," sobbed Sonya. "Mom, look at me," said Steph, holding her face in his hands. "You sold your jewelry to pay for my camps. You drove broken cars so I could have good equipment. You worked 2 jobs so I could pursue my dreams. If that doesn't deserve a beautiful house, then I don't know what does." It was impossible not to feel that that moment transcended a simple gift delivery. It was the culmination of a journey that had begun in a kitchen in 1995, when a young mother decided that her children's dreams were more important than her own needs. Great moments are born when years of love crystallize into a single action. And in that car, mother and son were experiencing exactly that. Steph helped Sonya get out of the car and walked to the front door. Her legs were shaky, as if she was still processing the reality that that property was really hers. When Steph opened the door with the keys that now belonged to his mother, Sonya stopped at the entrance and covered her mouth with her hands. The house was perfect. Amanda Foster had captured exactly the essence of what a mother who had lived modestly for decades would consider the ideal home.